Shalom, Peachy. So come on in and have a seat, folks. We're about to begin. We're at least preparing for that move at this point. Shabbat Shalom. I want to invite you to come and take a seat because we're going to begin together in just a moment. Shabbat Shalom to those of you who are joining us on screen.
We're here. Yay.
It's Cantor Cates is happy. Aren't they beautiful? Yeah, the hillside looks really beautiful. In fact, for those of you who are joining us on screen, you may notice, the ark's a little off to the side instead of directly behind us on screen, but that was not a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It was because as we were setting up this shot for you, we wanted you to have the chance to see those beautiful flowers right behind us on the hillside and to really feel as though you're here in the outdoor chapel with us. And so for those of you who are here in person, the folks of you on screen, I don't think I can make this promise to you, but those of you who are here in person, the deer have been out in force tonight. So just keep an eye on the hillside. You never know who, they've been all over the place. I think there were only 3 that I saw today. Al had taken a little video of them. I have photos from all the different times. They're the Shabbos deer. They're up on the hillside right now. They're up on the hillside having Shabbat dinner at your expense.
And they
your membership dollars at work.
And they especially like when you start to sing because that's what brings them around. They hear the beautiful music.
This is true. Is that a hint?
No.
I'm not offended or anything
Not
like
at
that.
all.
She was like, okay, that was enough, Rabbi. If you'll turn to the top of page 10. Hinei ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad ki hinei ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad ki hinei ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad ki hinei ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Let's hear your voice. Hinei
ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad.
Hinei ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. It is such a treat to be, I have not hit a point yet where I'm taking the rebirth of this beautiful outdoor chapel space for granted. We were without it for so many years after the fire that destroyed this whole hillside and this side of the chapel. And they told us there'd be no way to just rebuild the one side, that as the rains came, that the hillside would just start to come down, and we would have to remove the chapel and start all over again after we could stabilize the hillside. And that happened in December of 2017. And so a lot of you were at our summer Shabbat Under the Stars services as they would take place in the space between the religious school buildings. It was a beautiful spot for us to gather, don't get me wrong. No offense, our campus is gorgeous, and so there's a lot of nice places to gather to worship. But there's only one of these. And so this summer, finally, almost 3.5, getting toward 4 years later, we're back inside this gorgeous space. And what a great treat it is to welcome Sabbath together here in this spot and to be with you, to be with one another, to feel the gift of each other's presence, another thing that we will never take for granted again after having been separated from one another for so long. The opportunity for us to enjoy Shabbat community again is just the greatest gift. And so with gratitude to God, we are going to sing this beautiful metaphor that was created, still page 10, but now in the middle of the page. This beautiful metaphor created by the mystics, referring to God as Yedid Nefesh, as our soul friend, almost the soul mate. If we could experience that sense of love with all that is unity in a time that is so filled with fracture and fraction, for us to be able to experience our connection to all that lives and breathes, to God as soul friend, would be a beautiful way for us to set aside all of the intensity of another week now ended and to welcome in the beauty of this Shabbat evening. And so, Yedid Nefesh, heart's delight, soul friend, together we welcome Shabbat. Yedid Nefesh, Hava Rachaman, Hava Rachaman, Nishoch Avdecha, El Ritzonecha, El Ritzonecha. From the beginning again, please join us. Yedid Nefesh, Hava Rachaman, Hava Rachaman, Nishoch Avdecha, El Ritzonecha, El Ritzonecha, Yarutz Avdecha, Kemo Aya, Yishtachave, El Mul Adarecha. Yedid Nefesh, Hava Rachaman, Hava Rachaman, Nishoch Avdecha, El Ritzonecha, El Ritzonecha, Yarutz Avdecha, Kemo Aya, Yishtachave, El Mul Adarecha. Yedid Nefesh, Ha-Rachaman, Hava Rachaman, Nishoch Avdecha, El Ritzonecha, El Ritzonecha. Sabbath bride is just now arriving as the daylight has disappeared. Let us welcome her, embrace her, and embrace the promise of love that she brings. The words can be found on pages 20 and 21. We'll sing the first two verses, top of 20, and then top and bottom verses on 21, verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'diburecha, Hishmi'anu el hamiyuchad. Adonai echad u'shemo echad, L'shem u'tiferet b'nitila. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, Ki hi mekor habracha, Merosh mikedem netzucha, Sof ma'aseh v'machshava tchila.
Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela.
Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Top of 21. Hitoreri, hitoreri, Ki ba'orech u'mi'orim, Uri uri shidaberi, Kivod Adonai alayich nigla. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. If you're able, I invite you to stand and face the entrance to this outdoor chapel. And in your mind's eye, see her arrive. Boi v'shalom ateret bala, Gam b'simcha u'b'tzola, Toch emunei am segula. Boi chala, boi chala. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. 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 The Baruch Hu can be found on page 28. Adonai Hamivorach Leolam Vaed. Yai lai yai lai 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 yai lai yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai lai yai lai lai. We've been praying outdoors for much longer than we ordinarily do because of the pandemic, of course. Usually, right around Labor Day weekend, Shabbat, maybe a week later, somewhere in that zip code is usually when we kind of call it a summer and head indoors for our worship. Fortunately, we've had the opportunity because of this beautiful worship space and because we live in the blessed state of California, that we've had the opportunity that a lot of congregations, our friends around the country, are like, God, you guys can still pray outside. I'm a little envious. But look, it's starting to get darker. It's starting to get colder. Soon we'll probably, even in California, have to move indoors for more of our worship. But for now, we've had the gift over the course of these weeks to experience the changing of the seasons. When we started these services outdoors, it was right at summer solstice, right? It was in June. Actually, it was a little before solstice, and then into late June when we were praying at 7:30, and there was still plenty of daylight at 9 o'clock when we were done. Now here we are, services beginning at 6:15, and you really have the opportunity to fully immerse in the beauty of nighttime and to experience that. You came in the day, and by the time we head home, it will be very much night. That is supposed to kindle some wonderment in us, that we'd actually take notice of it as opposed to it just happening as it does every day, every night, and for the most part, us only noticing it in the sense that it is an impediment that we have to deal with. Turn on the lights in the car, or maybe it got too dark at the house and need to turn on the lights. Rarely do we pause and say, gosh, we live in a world where all of these wonders of creation do their thing in predictable harmony, and we can regulate our lives by those miracles. That is what this first prayer that we recite following Baruch Hu is supposed to awaken within us, an awareness of the rotating of time. And so I'll invite you just to join with me in reciting the words at the very bottom of page 30, words in Hebrew, the blessing for giving thanks to God for bringing on the evening and opening our eyes to see its beauty. Just that little sentence at the bottom of the page together in Hebrew. Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv aravim. At the bottom of page 33. Wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol. All these things your Torah gives to us. And the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. What could be a truer token of your abiding love than this holiest of your works and the living language that gives it form? Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha uvechol nafshecha uvechol meodecha vehayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levanecha veshinantam levanecha vedibarta bam veshivtecha bevetecha uvelechtecha baderech ושוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
On page 39. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. Page 40.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נורא תהילות, עושה פלא, עושה פלא. מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקע לפני משה, מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקע לפני משה. זה לי, הנו יעברו, אדוני ימלוך, לעולם, לעולם ועד. יאללה לילה, 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 יאללה לילה, יאללה לילה, לילה, יאללה לילה, יאללה לילה,
If you'll turn to your supplemental page. Look out on the disappearing horizon into the deep sea of dark. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom. In this darkness, God, cause us to lie down in peace. Let our minds and our hearts not be troubled. Let the darkness be for us a blanket of warmth, of encouragement, of hope, so that when light returns to us, the light will not only burn in the sky, but it will burn from within, that we may be sources of light, renewed. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom, l'ha'amidenu malkeinu b'chayim. Sukkot Shlomecha, Ufros Aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha. Shelter us beneath thy wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right. Amen. 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 The Amidah begins on page 46. I'll invite you to stand if you're able. Adonai Sfatai Tivta Adonai Sfatai Tivta Ufi Agid Tehillah Ufi Agid Tehilatecha Adonai Sfatai Tivta Adonai Sfatai Tivta Ufi Agid Tehilatecha Ufi Agid Tehilatecha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu ve'Imoteinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor ve'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, Vekonei Hakol, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהן, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה, רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם. מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיה הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום, יהללוך סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
The Amidah continues in silence through page 62. You may continue praying in silence while standing, or be seated whenever you're ready. Say shalom, shalom bimroma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Oh, say shalom, shalom bimroma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu Shalom Biromah. We are say Shalom Aleinu. Ve'achor Yisrael ve'imru Amen. Ve'achor Yisrael. So many of you have heard us speak here of Shabbat as Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel once described it, as an island in time, a metaphor we like to use. Rabbi Heschel was probably the greatest Jewish philosopher of the 20th century. He wrote those words in his landmark work entitled The Sabbath, which he published back in 1951. Now, when most of us think about the 1950s in this country, the need for a weekly island in time from all of the mass turmoil and conflict is not really what immediately comes to mind. Ozzie and Harriet are what immediately come to mind. Father Knows Best is what comes to mind. My Three Sons is what comes to mind. So 1951, when Heschel was writing, is remembered by most Americans as a rather tranquil time in this country. The island in time concept was hatched in a post-World War II era of restored stability, a time when most Americans felt much more certain of things, even if they shouldn't have. They were safe, they had a future. Communism had not yet emerged as the next big menace to fear. The tempestuousness of the civil rights movement had not yet arrived. You might say that all of 1951 was itself an island in time. And yet Heschel was convinced that we needed a weekly island, the one we're presently sharing, all of us, here tonight. Rabbi Heschel died in 1972 as he was in the midst of protesting the Vietnam War. And I can't help but wonder what he might have said about our need for this island in time, this peaceful oasis in which to consider ourselves and our place in this world. Could he have even imagined the unrest, the violence, the spurring of hatred, the uncertainty that now dominates our collective consciousness? Just how urgent might he have considered a restorative, conscience-driven island in time right now, today? I must admit there are times when I find myself wishing that Heschel's island came equipped with some tropical breezes, those padded blindfolds, and a pair of AirPods with the volume turned all the way up, as they said in Spinal Tap, to 11. Perhaps more than ever, real life has become filled with sights and sounds that we would just as soon not be subjected to. It would be enough to send us packing for Rabbi Heschel's island in time, for a permanent vacation if such a thing were in fact possible. Amid the unprecedented polarization over practically everything that we once expected to unify us, we are left with questions that defy answers. How do we stomach the lack of certainty? The fact that well-intentioned people are reaching so many conflicting conclusions. The fact that there are people you know and respect who see so many things so radically differently than you do. It seems impossible. And worse yet, it seems dangerous because the stakes are so high on matters as important as these. We know that both you and they can't be right. Somebody's reasoning is wrong on each one of these fronts, and errant conclusions in times like ours can have very frightening consequences. And so we've come to Shabbat, to this island in time that we wish we could live on. Of course, living on the island of Shabbat is impossible. We know that. But visiting, as we have all done, all of us here tonight, visiting, that we can do. And it is a remarkable source of strength and comfort. Shabbat has always been a respite during scary times in our people's history. Part of what made Shabbat work throughout the ages was the language of gratitude that its prayers force us to speak. Even when times are rough, our tradition reminds us that there is always more to be thankful for than to disparage. Even our ability to discuss such things and to understand one another, to process these things together. That is a blessing that we take for granted sometimes, but our minds and their creative flexibility is itself a wonder that should impress us much more than it usually does. Shabbat awakens us to all of that. But it's more than just the praying that makes Shabbat work, especially in times of uncertainty. Perhaps most fundamentally, the island of Shabbat is worth visiting because it is a time in which other people with open hearts are here in this place. When we just have the chance to greet one another and know that we have come together to create Shabbat together. What an incredible gift this is. It's not actually a place where we put on the blinders and blast the music into our ears to drown out the sounds that surround us. Tonight, we have sung together and prayed together, creating the sound, and we are learning and experiencing together. That's why you came, to be able to drink that in, being together. And while doing that seems rather simple, maybe even insignificant on the cosmic level, taken in deeply in the heart, I think I would argue that it is a psychic balm in times like these, especially. Blessed evidence, taken in subconsciously, that there will always be far more that we human beings have in common with one another than divides us. Our Torah portion this week has a thing or two to say about how being together with other open hearts is a much-needed elixir in uncertain times like these. The portion describes the first ever crisis of Jewish continuity. As we know, there have been several that have followed. Abraham, the very first Jew, is getting old and establishing a precedent that 1,000 generations of Jewish parents would follow. He wants to find a nice Jewish girl for his son, Isaac. And so he sends his most trusted servant, Eliezer, off into the wilderness, directing him to return to Abraham's birthplace and find a wife for Isaac among the women of his own hometown. He wants one of his own kind to marry his son. Now we can only imagine the turmoil that this causes for the servant Eliezer. Talk about uncertainty. He is headed into the desert by himself with 10 of Abraham's camels. He thinks that he knows where he's going, but then it is the desert. It's hard to know for sure, a lot of sand, and he can't come back until he has found Abraham's hometown and manages to convince one of the local women to leave her home and family and trust him to bring her back across the desert to some other town and trust him to introduce him to some guy that she will marry who she has never met before. And we think our world is uncertain. Eliezer's task is the very definition of uncertainty for him, for Abraham, for the entire Jewish future, as it would turn out. And still he accepts this challenge, and off he goes, somehow hoping to fulfill his mission. And incredibly, he actually arrives at the outskirts of Abraham's hometown, and now after a long journey that must have been filled with heat and sand and fear, he has got one thought on his mind. What thought do you think that is? Mayim has been brought to us as a guess. In Hebrew, that is the correct answer. 100 points for Glenn Gottlieb. The answer is water. That is what is on his mind. Water. I need water. And so when he sees a young woman coming up from the local spring, carrying her filled water jar upon her shoulder, he just cannot control himself. He runs up to her and begs her, please let me sip a little water from your jar. Now, I want you to put yourself in the young woman's shoes for a moment. You're beautiful, you're young, you're alone, and some dingy stranger with a desperate look in his eye approaches you aggressively with 10 camels at his side. And he badgers you to let him drink from your water. Now, if this was happening today to your or my teenage daughter, we would have taught her how to respond to that situation with mace. But what does the biblical Rebecca do? Not only does she say drink, she addresses him with respect, calling him my lord, Adoni. She then quickly lowers her jar to his lips, and she volunteers to go fetch more water for his thirsty camels, which she wasn't even asked to do. Invents that out of whole cloth. Brought back to life by that act of kindness, Eliezer knows that he has found Isaac's wife, and Rebekah becomes the second Jewish matriarch, whose name we just chanted moments ago in the Amidah. And her values of hospitality and generosity become our people's values. The power of open hearts in times of uncertainty. It was really no big deal for Rebekah to say yes to Eliezer's request. It was a big deal, however, for Eliezer. A giant, great, big deal. A newcomer in a very unfamiliar place, in a very, very anxious moment, who needed just a touch of humanity to sustain him. Take away the sand and the heat and the camels, and this is what our temple exists to be and to create in so many lives, your lives, your lives. We are here on this night to recalibrate, to retune our souls to the frequency of our most life-lifting values, to recognize the distinction between depth and distraction, to reprioritize what matters, and to follow the soulful example brought to us by Rebekah this week in the Torah, to open our hearts, even when uncertainty simmers all around us and in us, and to unleash its power, creating a world that more closely resembles the one that we need, that we dream of. This is how we change lives. This is how we change ourselves. Let this Shabbat kindle in us that light of hope, of goodness, at this moment in time when we all need that redeeming touch of humanity so deeply. Amen. There's a reason why we pray a prayer for healing as a part of Shabbat worship service, because this enterprise that we're sharing in with one another right now is built for exactly what I just described, that kind of restoration, that sort of reconnecting with the best part of ourselves so that we can bring it into our own lives, bring it to the people with whom we share life, and out even beyond that to a world that is becoming increasingly cold and unkind. And so that muscle memory is developed by our calling to mind and to heart those who really, really are struggling even more deeply than we are, struggling with illness, struggling with brokenness, struggling with despair, deep disillusionment in this moment, a real feeling of displacement. There are so many, including ourselves, who are in need of a prayer for healing, strength, rebuilding. And so I want to invite those of you who are here with us in person, if you wish to speak aloud the name of someone or someone's in your personal circle who you'd like to include in our collective prayer for healing on this Shabbat, In just a moment, you can rise, and when my eyes meet yours, I'll look forward to hearing you share those names with our congregation. For those of you who are praying with us from home, I invite you also during this quiet time to speak aloud the names of those you would like to include in our prayer for healing on this Shabbat Eve. For all of them and for all of us, let's join together reciting the prayer, singing the prayer from our hearts. Mishaberach can be found in the middle of page 253. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Mishaberach imotenu mekol habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Aleinu can be found at the bottom of page 282. If you're able, please rise.
Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula leotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoye haratzon, velo samanu kemishbechot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Page 287.
ונאמר וידוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ושמו אחד ושמו אחד.
some words to help us prepare for the recitation of Kaddish, words found on page 289. The light of life is a finite flame. Like the Shabbat candles, life is kindled, it burns, it glows. It is radiant with warmth and beauty. But soon it fades, its substance is consumed, and it is no more. In light we see, in light we are seen. The flames dance and our lives are full. But as night follows day, the candle of our life burns down and gutters. There is an end to the flames. We see no more and are no more seen. Yet we do not despair, for we are more than a memory slowly fading into the darkness. With our lives, we give life. Something of us can never die. We move in the eternal cycle of darkness and death, of light and life. As we prepare to recite the Kaddish prayer this evening, we remember especially Forrest Bell, Fanny Bernstein, Dorothy Burson, Ruth Bleiweiss, William Broker, Harry Chasen, Julie Eisen Cohen, Max Esterson, Evelyn Goldberg, Stan Goodman, Brett Gottlieb, Joseph Klamer, Rachel Levinson Klamer, Stephen Koffler, Alfred Koller, Jan Kraus, John Landis, Sylvia Euster Levin, Isabel Littman, Kathy Jo Lodge, Selma Mendel, Eva N. Newman, Miriam Prusson, Will Rosenfeld, Beth Scheckman-Alper, Dina Sogor, Goldie Moskowitz-Sussman, Irving Walsh, Martin Weinberg, Philip Weinstein, Helen Zarin, Milton Zarin. Are there other names we should include? If so, please speak them aloud. We think as well of all those who we name in our hearts, and those who have perished from COVID-19 here in Los Angeles, throughout our country, and all throughout the world. And we also, of course, call to mind and to heart those who have perished as innocent victims of violence in a world that is beset with too much hatred. Let us, in our remembrance, also rededicating ourselves to become a force for peace. Holding them all close at heart, we say, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the memory of the righteous is an everlasting blessing. As together we give thanks for the blessing of life with the words of Mourner's Kaddish, found on page 294. If you're able, please rise. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon, u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'isman kariv imru, amen. Yehi shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei, v'yitadar v'yit'aleh v'yitalal, shemei dekudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, ta'amiram be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama Rabbah min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru, amen. May the giver of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved among us, and let us together say, amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael vehi meru יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל והימרו אמן. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.